talk about leftovers. You know how many there are leftover people, not leftover people. Any people who don't like leftovers? I don't like leftovers. How many gum chewers do I have? How many are gum chewers, hardcore gum chewers? And how many hate people that chew gum? Not hate the people, but when they chew gum. You raise your hand. I'm with you there. You know when people chew gum and you can hear it and they pop it and you're like, oh, yeah, that's me. Apparently that is a mental condition, like a diagnosed mental condition like schizophrenia. I don't know. But just hearing gum being chewed is that right there. Did you hear it? Oh! I started that whole thing so Blake would, I looked at Blake, sorry. I did that whole thing so you would know that I don't want to hear you pop your, no, I'm just kidding. But, there are gum people and there are not gum people. So of you gum people, where are y'all gum people at? Who wants gum? You want some? Who wants it? You want it? You raised your hand. Who wants my gum? Now see, look, all y'all raise your hand and say, yeah, I love gum. I want to chew some gum. I've got some gum. I just put it in right before communion. I had it. It's double bubble. It's still soft a little bit. It's not much flavor left because I've chewed it for longer than 3 seconds, but no takers. So nobody wants my gum. Now, how all you gum people who said they liked gum, and why don't y'all want my gum? There you go. There's an unchewed piece. It's unchewed. That was a sleight of hand. I didn't mean to do that. There's the chewed piece. Sorry. If y'all didn't see it, it was like the Matrix. You getting out of the way of it. There you go. Some gum. There you go. Courtesy of Grant. I stole it from him. So of you people who said you were gum chewers but didn't want my gum, why did you not want my gum? Because it's already chewed, right? It's gross. You don't want to chew somebody else's ABC gum. That's gross. How many of y'all know what ABC gum is? If you have kids, you know what it is. Already been chewed, ABC gum. So that's from my childhood. But you don't want someone else's chewed up gum. You're all gum people, but you didn't want the gum that I offered to you. So you don't want leftovers. You don't want something that somebody's already done with. You want the best. You want the first. Today we're talking about giving. We're continuing our giving series entitled In Blank We Trust, where we were looking at the biblical concept of giving and stewardship. And today we're talking about giving God our first fruits, giving God our best. This series is about money. It's not fun. Talking about money is not fun, but it's crucial for the church. For the American church as a whole, and it's something that each church should be preaching and teaching. This series is not about, like I said last week, this series is not about guilting you into giving more zeros. This is not about you filling out a bigger check. This is about having faith and trust in God. The purpose of this series is for all of us to grow in spiritual maturity and come to a place where we can freely and willingly give God a portion of what He has blessed us with. This series is about our heart, our devotion to God, and our willingness to put our faith and our trust in Him. A part of putting our faith and trust in Him is showing that with our money. So today we're looking at our first fruits. We hear the term first fruit in the church. You really don't hear that through day-to-day conversation. That's not something we talk about all the time. And we are not a society anymore that's made up specifically of farmers or, cattle herders or sheep herders. Obviously we have a few of those, but for the most part, we're an industrialized nation. But the concept of giving God the first fruit is shown throughout the whole Bible, through the Old Testament and the New Testament. But in a nutshell, giving God of the first fruit was giving the first of the harvest to God, giving the best of the harvest to God. If you were an apple farmer, you would take the first of your harvest, the best, most choice, the prettiest apples, and you would give those to God. If you were a sheep herder, you would take the best sheep of your flock, the most prized sheep that had come to you that season, and you would offer that to God. If you raised bulls, the same thing. You would take the choice bull, the greatest bull you had, and then offer that to God. Throughout the entire Bible, anytime God is telling us to give Him something through an offering, He is telling us to give Him our best. It's not just an isolated teaching, that is found just one little small part of the Bible. It is listed throughout the whole Bible. If you read any of the following passages, you will see God specifically commanding the Israelites to give him their best. They're up on the screen there. Exodus 13, 23, 34, Leviticus 2, 23, Numbers 18 and 28, Deuteronomy 18 and 26, 2 Chronicles 31, Ezekiel 44, Nehemiah 10, 12, and 13. Each one of those chapters, the entire chapter, speaks specifically on giving God the first fruits, giving God the first of the harvest, giving God the first of everything that we have. This is just the tip of the iceberg. God commands our best. The first recorded offering in the Bible is found all the way back in Genesis 4. You see, God created the heavens and the earth and everything in it. He created all the animals, and then he created Adam and Eve. And then, as we know, Adam and Eve fell in sin, and then after that, they had two sons named Cain and Abel. And then once Cain and Abel grew up and became men of their own, Cain became a farmer and Abel became a shepherd. For some reason, we don't know why, Scripture doesn't tell us why, but both of these young men come and make an offering to God. And this is what it says in Genesis 4, 3 through 5. In the course of time, Cain brought an offering to the Lord, an offering of the fruit of the ground. And Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of the fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering he had no regard. So Cain was very angry, and his face fell. So each of these two young men bring an offering to God. Cain brings an offering of the fruit of the ground. That's all we know. Could have been grain, could have been corn, could have been actual fruit. We don't know. But what we do know is that God was not pleased with the offering that Cain brought to him. He did not bring his best. He brought out of his abundance, but he did not bring his best. Cain's offering was lacking. He just brought some of the produce, and that's it. But Abel, on the other hand, Abel brought God the firstborn sheep of his flock, the firstborn. He brought the best. He brought the most grand to God, and as a result, God had regard for his offering. He was pleased with Abel because he brought his best, but he was not pleased with Cain. Cain gave to God, but Abel gave God his best. God was pleased with Abel, but not Cain, and this made Cain angry, and his face fell. God calls him out on his anger and sadness in the next two verses, in 6 and 7. It says, "The Lord said to Cain, 'Why are you angry, and why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must rule over it.'" So God tells Cain that if he would have given his best, if he would have given his first fruits, given the first of his harvest, then he would have been pleased with his offering. He would have had great reward for him, and he would have been happy with him. But he said, "Instead, you gave me just something. You gave me the middle. You gave me the worst. And as a result, sin was crouching at your door, and you failed." Sin is crouching at the door, and it is its desire to overtake you. This is such a great sentence. This temptation of giving God anything but our best is crouching at the door, waiting to get us. But this is something, giving God our best, this whole concept of giving God our best is not something that should bring us worry. It's not something that should bring us a feeling of unfairness. If you just look at it from the outside and you see, wait a minute, God is asking me to give him the best of what I have. Of everything that I work for, God wants the best. Why can't he just be okay with something else? Why does God want the best? He just kind of seems selfish of God. How dare he ask for my best? But it's us giving God our first fruits is more for us than it is for him. God doesn't need anything from us. Everything is his anyway. Giving of our first fruits and giving in general has two huge reasons, two main reasons. And knowing why we do something is important. It takes us from doing that thing from completely out of being legality or having to do it or having to check it off to being something that we want to do. We have to understand why God has called us to give to him and why God has called for us to give to him of our first fruits. First and foremost, we give to God because he has given us so much, and we are grateful and thankful for what he has given. The second reason we give to God our best is because that we have faith and trust in Him that He will take care of us. Everything that we have is from God. Everything is His. Everything that we have is God's. This is a concept that we don't like to accept. This is a concept that we can't get into our small human minds. Everything that we have is God's. Your house is God's. Your kids are God's. Your marriage is God's. This church is God's. Everything that we have is God's. You could say, wait a minute. No. Everything that I have is mine because I've worked hard for it. I've worked hard for it and it's mine. But who gave you that drive to work hard? Who gave you the opportunity to put yourself in a place where you can work hard and gain those things? Who put you in a position where you would be able to work for it? The fact that you're sitting in a church in the good old US of A, who put you in that place? Everything that we have is from God. We have got to get ourselves out of a frame of mind where we are giving to God out of what we have, instead of giving to God out of what is already His. We are giving out of what He has blessed us with, not of what we have earned. There's a word in the English language that I absolutely hate. I abhor this word, and the word is mine. The word mine is the most vile and nasty word in the entire English language. It's mine. It's mine. You can't say it's mine without making a fist, can you? Try it. It's mine. No, all you automatically go to making a fist, and that's not a loving gesture. It's mine. How many of y'all have kids? How many of y'all have multiple kids? How many times have you heard, that's mine, that's mine, get off my candy, that's mine. Ain't your candy? I took you trick-or-treating. My candy. Anyway, see, it's bad, it's my candy. See? I remember when Grant was younger, we went to McDonald's. We were going to a U of L football game back when they were good. And anyway, and we're sitting on the McDonald's in Floyd Street. This was our tailgate, and we went to McDonald's. And of course, I had ate all of my food real quick, probably like 4 Big Macs or something. But and as usual, he was being slow eating his food. And I reached over and I grabbed one of his fries and pulled it and popped it in my mouth. And he grabbed his box, his fry box and his nugget box, and he pulled it and he said, "Dad, those are mine." And I'm like, "Oh, hold up. You ain't got no job. You didn't buy that. And I didn't see you pull your card out and swipe it. I bought those for you. Those are mine. I'm just letting you eat them." And while we're on the subject, where you sleep is mine. Your bed is mine. Your toys are mine. The clothes that you're wearing are mine. If it weren't for me, you'd be sitting out in the middle of a field naked and cold and hungry. That's mine. It ain't yours. But then when we do the same thing with God, we take our money and we take our possessions and we squeeze them and we hold them. We say, "No, God, this is mine." And He's up there saying, "Really? Really?" And you can just imagine God banging His head on the wall saying, "No. Everything that you have, I have given to you. And I've given it to you because I love you so desperately and dearly, and I want you to have those things. All I'm asking for you to do is give back to me out of gratefulness and thankfulness." And we give Him our best because He gave us His best. Let's look at a passage from Deuteronomy where God commands the Israelites to give of their first fruits. In the entire chapter, 26th chapter of Deuteronomy, it's a great chapter that talks about the thankfulness to God and giving back to God as the results of being thankful. But we're just going to read the first 10 verses. This is right as the Israelites are coming out of the wilderness and going into the promised land. And this is what He says to them. He says, "When you come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance, and have taken possession of it and live in it, you shall take some of the first of all of the fruit of the ground, which you harvest from your land that the Lord your God is giving you, and you shall put it in a basket, and you shall go to the place that the Lord your God will choose, and make His name to dwell there. You shall go to the priest who is in the office of that time and say to him, I declare today that the Lord your God, that I have come into the land that the Lord swore to our fathers to give us. Then the priest shall take the basket from your hand and set it down before the altar of your God. And you shall make a response before the Lord your God. A wandering Armenian was my father, and he went down to Egypt and sojourned there, few in number. And there he became a nation, great and mighty and populous. And the Egyptians treated us harshly and humiliated us and laid on us hard labor. Then we cried to the Lord, our God, the God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. And the Lord brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with great deeds of terror, with signs and wonders. And he brought us into this place and gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And behold, now I bring the first of the fruits of the ground, which you, O Lord, have given to me. And you shall set it down before the Lord your God and worship before the Lord your God. Do you understand what's going on in this passage? Do you see what God is telling the people here? He says, once you get into this land that I'm giving you, and once you get to a place, an inheritance that I'm giving you, then you are going to go and you are going to sow seeds and you're going to have a harvest. I want you to take the first of everything that you get and bring it to me. And then not only just bring it to me and just hand it to the priest and go away and not think about it, but worship me. Remember all the things that I have done for you. Remember the time that you were in Egypt, when your forefathers were in Egypt and time was awful, and how I brought you out of there, and how I've taken you from just a small family and turned you into a great nation. Remember everything that I've done for you, and that's why you were giving this offering to me. That is why you are giving me this fruit, because I have taken care of you. They were supposed to remember him. It was with a grateful and an appreciative attitude that they were to give their first fruits. They were told to look back on everything that God had given them. They were told to bring their first fruit, the best of what they had, out of gratitude for God. They weren't just instructed to bring food to the tabernacle for the priest to eat or to help the needy. He told them to give their first fruits. It wasn't just so they could put a legalistic spin on it. He set up offering and giving and tithing of our first fruits because he wants us to remember all the things that he's done for us. And that does not just apply for the Israelites or the nation of Israel. That applies for us today. When we take up an offering, we do it right after worship and right after communion. Because it is our time to continue worship. Giving back to God is a time of worship. But giving also shows us that we have our faith in God. Giving our best, our first fruits to God shows that we trust God. Look, we talk about faith all the time. Put your faith in God. Put your faith in God. And sometimes what we do is we take that word faith and we equate that to belief in. We equate that to a cognitive and an intellectual way to believe in something. But that is not what the word faith means. The word belief and faith are vastly different things. I believe that Brooke exists. But that doesn't help our marriage one bit. Just believing that Brooke is a person, she's not like an android or an apparition or a hologram, I don't know. Just believing that she's a person does nothing for our marriage. But having faith in her does everything for our marriage. I have faith that she has my best intentions at heart. I have faith that she loves me with everything. I have faith that she will always be faithful to me. And she has faith in me. See, there's a great difference between belief and faith. We have to not only believe in God, but we have to have faith in him. Faith that he loves us. Faith that he will take care of us. Faith that he will provide for us. So when we give away our money to further the kingdom of God, this is us saying, God, I trust you. I trust you to do better with the little bit that I have left, that you will do better with it than I could do with all of it. When we make a decision to give to God, it has to hurt. Wait a minute, what? Back up. Don't like that. Don't like that at all. We have to give where it hurts. Because if we don't give where it hurts, it's not a sacrifice. We have to give where it doesn't make sense. You see, it doesn't make sense for the shepherd to bring the firstborn of his flock, the best of his flock. It doesn't make sense for him to give that away. It doesn't make sense for the farmer to come up and say, this is the first of my harvest. This is the best I have. I'm going to give it away. That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense for us to look at our budget and our finances and say, we only have this much to live on, but we're going to give this much away. It doesn't make sense. But that is why it's called a sacrifice. When we sit down and work out and make the decision that we are going to give to God and know that we'll be strapped, it's going to hurt. That's what an offering is, and that's what a sacrifice is. There's a story in the gospel that shows this concept perfectly in Mark 12. Jesus sat down opposite the treasury and watched the people putting money into the offering box. Many rich people put in large sums, and a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which make a penny. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the offering box. For they all contributed out of their abundance. She, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on. Think about that for a minute. She gave all that she had to live on. That offering hurt. That offering did not make sense. That gift into the treasury, into the priest, did not make sense. It hurt. She gave all she had, but she trusted and had faith in God that He would take care of her and provide her for her every need. That is why Jesus said this was a perfect gift. See, because here's the deal. When it comes to giving to God and giving back to God and giving our first fruits, when we come to a place in our lives and in our walk with God where our faith matures to a place where we can say to God, I am giving you this even though I know I'm not going to be able to make it. When we give knowing that we're going to be strapped, where on paper the dollars and cents and the numbers don't add up, when we come to a place where we have to stop and fully rely on God, that is when our faith is at the deepest and most mature time. But so often, this is the last attitude we see when it comes to giving in the church. We don't trust God. We definitely don't trust God with our money. When's the last time we honestly stopped and completely relied on God? When is the last time you looked at your bank account and said, we're not going to make it this week? We're not going to make it this week. I'm going to have to completely rely on God. When we come to a place where we can give to God abundantly and freely without compulsion and completely cheerfully and rely on Him for what we need, then our faith is mature. God calls for our first fruits. He calls for our best. He calls for us to give out of thankfulness and gratefulness for everything that He's done for us, and for us also to give out of faith and trust that He will take care of us. And here's the deal. This idea of first fruit, this concept of giving God our best is not just for money. It's not just for finances and giving. It's for every single facet of life. God doesn't call for the best of our finances and then for the worst of everything else we have. He calls for our best in everything that we do. We give God the best of our time and our service, of our talents, of our love. We give God our best when we go to work and we work as for God, giving Him the glory. We give Him our best when we treat people, other people, with deep love and loving them deeply and unconditionally, showing them mercy and showing them grace. We give God our best when we are home with our families and we do everything that we can to raise our children in God. We give our best when we go and volunteer at a school or for a Habitat for Humanity or a homeless shelter, any place like this. When we go and do those things in the name of Christ, we give our best to God. We give our best to God when we go to church every Sunday morning, not out of compulsion, not out of because that's what we're supposed to do to be a good Christian, not because that's what we've always done, not because we need to mark it off of a checklist, but we give our best to God when we come to church and we worship Him with everything that we have. And we listen to the sermon and we learn and we try to understand what God is teaching us. We give God our best when we give to Him out of everything that He has blessed us with, out of gratitude and faith. There's a short video that I want you guys to watch that sums up the concept of first fruits. It's a beautiful video, and I want you all to watch it. And after this video, we're going to have a time of worship and a time of invitation. And during this time, I want you to give God your best and worship him with everything you have. Watch this video.
Two men bring an offering to the Lord, one of the fruit of the ground, the other the firstborn of his flock. God accepts one and rejects the other. Why? Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. Abel also brought the firstborn of his flock and of their fat. The word tells us clearly that the offering Abel brought was the firstborn of his flock. But it doesn't say that Cain brought the first fruits of his crops. It simply says, in the process of time, Cain brought an offering. Cain harvested his crops and over time gathered enough to bring an offering. It was an offering on Cain's terms. God accepted Abel's offering because it was the first of his increase. Cain's offering was rejected because it wasn't the first of his. Giving the first to God requires faith. When a firstborn lamb is born in a flock, it's not possible to know how many more lambs that you might produce. But Abel gave his firstborn lamb in faith, whereas Cain made sure he had enough for himself before giving to God. Many of us treat God the same way as Cain, making sure we have enough money before we see if there's anything left for God. Even if we give from what's left over, God can't accept the offering because it's not the first fruit. Other stories emphasize this truth. In the account of the fall of Jericho, the Lord gave strict instructions that the Israelites were not to keep any of the spoils from Jericho. All of it belonged to him, the Lord declared. Jericho belonged to the Lord because it was the first city conquered in the Promised Land. It was the first fruits. God withheld his blessing from Israel when one man took some of the spoils for himself. The first belongs to God. There was much more at stake than money when Abraham offered his firstborn son Isaac. When God asked for his son, Abraham didn't wait to have 10 sons before giving Isaac. He gave the first when he only had one to give. Abraham had only the promise of having more sons. It took faith for Abraham to offer Isaac, faith that God respected and blessed. And God did the same for us. He gave his first in the form of his son, his first and only begotten son, who was given to us while we were still sinners. God gave Jesus in faith that we might one day give our lives to him. The gift of his son came before the blessing of our repentance and salvation. We give our first fruits in much the same way. Before we see the blessing of God, we give it in faith. Giving the first fruits of your income says to God, I recognize you first. I am putting you first in my life, and I trust you to take care of the rest.